Welcome back to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. With Halloween just around the corner, I decided to dedicate this podcast to witches.
Fairies found fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?
When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won.
That would be ere the set of sun.
Where the place,
Upon the heath.
there to meet with Macbeth.
Halloween has definitely cast a spell on me, or maybe it's more like a curse, so my apologies for this episode coming late, but it's still in time for my favorite day of the year. So today, I'll talk with San Diego State University professor Elizabeth Pollard about witches in history and on film. But first, a quick chat with Jackie Burns, who plays a younger version of one of the most iconic witches of all time.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
That's right. She's Elphaba in the touring company of Wicked. I asked her what was appealing about playing Elphaba, who grows up to be the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz.
I think that what's super appealing to me playing this role is that, we grew up on Wizard of Oz, and this is so amazing because this is it's like you're watching the movie, and then it's as if the movie, the director Joe Mantello always says it's like the movie camera like slightly turns to the right and you see what's going on over there. You know what I mean? Or to the left, you see what's happening behind the scenes, so you find out why things really happened. We have this idea of this wicked witch from the movie, and it's not at all what the movie depicts. And it's so fun getting to play the character, and that is not what the movie is. This girl was completely misunderstood. She was not wicked at all. In fact, has the biggest, most glorious heart in the world. She's so passionate about everything and making sure everything is right and fair, and that she doesn't think before she does it. And then sometimes things don't always go out the way it should.
Do you remember the first time you saw The Wizard of Oz and what you thought of the Wicked Witch?
Oh, my God, yeah. I was young. How old was I? I think I was like 8 or 9. I was very afraid of her. Scary. Those monkeys, scary. Yes. I was very scared. I loved the movie. I mean, how can you not love that movie? It's so glorious. But yeah, I was very afraid of her. So it's funny that she has become such a huge part of my life.
And what do you think it is about witches that so fascinates people? I mean, that...
Magic. Who doesn't love magic? I love magic. Everybody loves magic. I think witches are so, you have there's an air, it just depends. You can have the Wicked Witch where there's like an air of danger, and that's exciting, and, you don't know, you can't really put your finger on the pulse of what they're going to do, so you're constantly on edge, which is exciting for us, and then you can have a good witch where, it's like, oh, they can grant my heart's desire and give me anything I want because they're magical, and, you just want to be around them because they're going to make you better. So I think witches are so fascinating to us because they are this otherworldly being.
And do you think that overall, people tend to view witches as something that tends to be evil, or is there kind of this constant pull back and forth between witches being this thing that are evil and this thing that could potentially be good?
I mean, when I was younger, I think that I always viewed a witch as being evil. It's funny because my mother, I every year wanted to be, for Halloween, a witch, but I wanted to be a pretty witch. I was very specific in my being a witch because, it's something cool about being evil, but also feeling pretty and glamorous. But I do think that because there is that air of magic and danger, that most people do view witches as something of a little bit on the dark side.
That was actress Jackie Burns, who plays Elphaba in the touring company of Wicked that opens this week in San Diego. Now to Professor Elizabeth Pollard. You could call this podcast Beth Squared Tackle Macbeth, but we cover a lot more than just Shakespeare. In fact, we cover witches from ancient Rome to Monty Python and Hogwarts. So let's begin. Beth, I was lucky enough to hear you give a talk about witches at San Diego State, and that inspired me to seek you out to talk about specifically witches on film. But before we get into some specific films, I just wanted you to kind of give me a little background in terms of how did you get interested in this topic? What is it about it that kind of fascinated you?
So I started to work on witches in historical contexts back in grad school when I was working on my dissertation. And I became utterly fascinated by women who were manipulating their environment, their relationships, their social situation in a way that you couldn't categorize as religion. You couldn't categorize it as science. Or some sort of medical intervention. You couldn't categorize it as superstition. It's a fundamentally different category of acting that these women were doing. And I could see women being described doing these kinds of activities in Roman novels, in historical narratives describing these activities that women might do. But then there's this other body of evidence, these actual witch magic books and magic scrolls that come from the ancient world. And so I was trying to negotiate between these two kinds of evidence. We've got the descriptions of what women do that looks really witchy, and then you've got these books that are telling them, both men and women, how to do these things. And I wanted to try to negotiate between these two different kinds of evidence. So that's how I got interested in it. And there are so many fascinating, what we would describe as witches from the ancient world, that I just became captivated by them. Characters like Medea, like Circe, they're the epic witches. But then you're a sort of run-of-the-mill old woman who is drunk and mutters, and then something goes awry. Or these other women who show up in novels who do the full range of what we might think of witches doing, bringing down the moon, shape-shifting, making their lovers pay either by having the women attached to them unable to give birth. So just these fascinating characters that I wanted to dig deeper into. So I wrote my dissertation on that, these women accused of witchcraft in the Roman world. And then when I came here to San Diego State, I started to broaden that out and think a lot more about other historical moments of witchcraft and both the doing of witchy activities, but also the accusations of them in medieval Europe, in early modern Europe, and even in colonial America. So it's just a fascinating body of material because it gets to the heart of what someone might do to get themselves accused of witchcraft, and what are the situations where that might happen.
So are you coming at it from both a literary and historical point of view?
Correct. Not just a literary and historical, but also a material evidence point of view. So there are the literary descriptions of witches. There are the historical narratives that describe witch trials. And then there's also evidence for the actual practice of witchcraft. So it's in many ways three bodies of evidence.
And you're talking about looking at these Roman witches. Now, I have to admit that when I think of witches, I tend to think colonial America and kind of medieval.
Yes.
And Roman witches is not something I'm nearly as familiar with in literature or like in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. They're fascinating because in many ways they're the forerunners for a number of the witches from these later periods. So the witches many of us often think of are from the 16th, 17th century, the women in the Dürer woodcuts, flying in the sky on goats and out in the middle of the woods. We think of those, but the 16th century imagination of what witches might do out in the woods and making potions and riding goats, apart from the pact with Satan, which is a later development, much of that is incredibly Roman. Potions in the woods, women in a work workshop with noxious ingredients, doing creepy things with creepy ingredients. That's textbook 1st and 2nd century Roman notions of what it means to be a witch.
Now, you also mentioned that you look to documents about witch trials. And that's something that's really fascinating because that also brings up a lot of issues regarding the way society tries to control women as well. And how does witchcraft kind of play into this whole social fabric?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whenever I'm trying to think about a witchcraft scenario, like a trial, or even a fictional representation, like a movie, like a film, I always try to think about looking at the broader situation. So not just who is being accused, be it a male or a female, who is doing the accusing, and what is being accused. So there's that's all very important. So accuser, accused, and accusation, but also that broader context, because usually that accusation is happening because of some conflict. It might be a conflict between individual parties. It might be a conflict within a larger political situation. It might be a conflict over values. So there's always a broader situation, be it religious, economic, political, within which those accusations are taking place.
Because we've started to talk about trials, the entry point possibly for the first film to discuss maybe Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yes, of course.
Now,
always my favorite.
This is not necessarily the most serious entry point. However, I think Monty Python really nails the extreme to which this can be taken and the ridiculousness of how an accusation can kind of balloon out of proportion and kind of the hysteria that can surround these kind of accusations.
We have found the witch. May we burn her? Burn her! How do you know she is a witch? She looks like one. Bring her forward.
I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch.
But you are dressed as one.
They dressed me up like this. And this isn't my nose. It's a false one.
Well, we did do the nose.
The nose?
And the hat. But she's a witch.
Did you dress her up like this?
No. Yes. A bit. She has got a wart.
What makes you think she is a witch?
Well, she turned me into a newt.
A newt?
I got better. Burn her anyway!
What I love about this, and scholars who dig into these kinds of accusations in literary contexts, we always look at what's called narratology, sort of the broader context within a text that a scene takes place. So that witchcraft trial in Monty Python, whenever I share it with other people, I always back it up and make sure I have those monks. And then they hit themselves on the head, right? So you've got this juxtaposition of mortification of the body by these monks, right? So this right religious behavior by men, and then the king sort of gallops past that, and the crowd runs past them. A witch, a witch, a witch! And that's when they're dragging her into the scene. So there's this sort of setup of proper religious behavior leading right into this scene where the local leader is come to as an authority figure. I know I'm making this sound boring. It's like the funniest scene ever, but you get into it and you realize that there's a court set up that can handle it. Namely, this local authority figure. He's the scientist. When you see him at the beginning of the scene, he's tapping into an ongoing gag in the film about the carrying of coconuts. He's trying to launch a bird carrying a coconut, and he's trying these scientific experiments. So he, of course, is the one you come to when you're trying to answer the question of whether or not this woman is a witch. And I love that trial because it talks you through in a tries to be logical way why it is that she's a witch. And it has everything to do with what does she look like. They're trying to say she looks like what they expect her to be a witch, what they expect a witch to look like. She does the things that they think witches do, turning people into the newt, and so shape-shifting being one of those things that witches can do. So that scene is just fabulous because it sets up a situation, a scene within which a witch trial is taking place. So ostensibly reason, but it's utterly fallacious logic. Ostensibly religious sincerity, and yet the mockery of what it is to accuse this woman and the rationale on the basis of which she's accused coming from the crowd. So that's just it's a great scene. It's got so much going on in it.
And it also gets to that sense of mob hysteria.
Absolutely. A witch, as they drag her in. The attempt to speak individually within the crowd. You see that when forced to speak individually, they're hesitant. When they're all together as the crowd, they're shouting and dragging her through the street.
Well, what's interesting about this scene, too, for me, I know you haven't had a chance to see this film from Zambia called I Am Not a Witch, but there are moments in it because there's a young girl who, for no real reason, a woman trips carrying water and looks at this little girl who's in front of her and decides, you are a witch. That's why I've tripped and fallen. And this film is very kind of poetical and uses magic realism. But at the heart of it is this notion of a young child accused of being a witch and put into what they call a witch camp. And there are moments in the film that have the absurdity of Monty Python and that trial.
We have a situation here.
What situation do you have?
I have a small girl here. They're accusing her of witchcraft.
So?
So the same girl is not denying.
What?
She is refusing to confirm or deny if she's a witch.
What do you mean?
Under interrogation, sir. She is refusing to confirm or deny if she's a witch.
So, you mean she is not denying that she's a witch?
She's not denying, sir.
And yet it also finds the political and social reality and how shocking that is. And this is something that you talk about with your students, about this reality.
Absolutely. And there is nothing that brings home the reality of witchcraft accusations to students more than realizing that they still actually happen, that witch hunt isn't just a term you throw around, but there are actual witchcraft accusations in many African countries even today. And they're cutting to the heart of some of the basic issues that are playing out in an accusation. Similar to early modern Europe, 16th century, there's the notion that oftentimes old women would be accused of being witches, not because of anything they had done, but because of the guilt their situation placed on the accuser. This idea that an old woman comes up to your door, knocks, asks you for help, and you turn her away. And as she turns away and leaves, you give her nothing. She turns away and maybe mutters something or, grumpily goes off, or you see her sitting on a street corner later. And then maybe you trip. Maybe you lose a child. Maybe something terrible happens in your life, in your family. And then you remember, oh, it's because I turned that woman away and she mumbled as she walked off. That was a spell, I'm sure of it. Or she looked at me evil, angry and enviously. I'm quite certain that was a spell that she was casting on me. And so that situation where the accuser is projecting their own guilt, their own issues onto the accused, who then has to suffer the consequences of that guilt rather than the accuser who is feeling it.
And then a lot of times when these accusations are made, the women that the accusations are made against tend to be, at least like in this current film, I Am Not a Witch, one of the things that's pointed out is that it tends to be women who are not attached to men, who don't have men to kind of protect them or stand up for them, or women who are on their own, widowed or too young or orphaned or whatever. And so, again, this raises some genuine social issues about how women can be victimized like this.
Absolutely. Women operating outside of the traditional power structures sometimes operating in a way to bring themselves benefit will often find themselves the victim of witchcraft accusation. It happens in the Roman period, and it happens in colonial America, and it happens even today in this sort of example you're describing.
Now, in that Monty Python example, we talked about a few of the things that tend to define witches for people: the nose, the hat, the old women. For me, one of the places where kind of those stereotypes or those images stem from is Shakespeare's Macbeth. I mean, I think that's one of almost everyone kind of knows on some level the double, toil and trouble.
Toad goes under cold stones, days and nights at 31.
Sweltered venom sleeping got, boil thou first in the charmed pot.
Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog.
Adder's fork and blind sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing.
Nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, severed in the moon's eclipse.
And, the witches huddling over some cauldron and dropping different, parts of creatures in. For you, what is that scene? How does that scene help to define witches for generations to come?
Well, one of the things I love about that scene, you and I were talking about the Old Globe earlier. Mm-hmm. I've seen Macbeth performed multiple times. Sometimes it's performed in its early 17th century context. Recently at the Old Globe, it was performed in a sort of like early 20th century context. And yet the witches remain every bit as terrifying, whether they're, these old, creepy, out-in-the-woods women, or in the more recent Globe production where they were chained inhabitants of an insane asylum. They can say the same words, and they literally conjure up the same fear and the same terror. So I think they have this timeless quality. You can plunk them down into multiple historical contexts and imaginations, and yet they speak to some of that same fear. These older women working in a group, usually in threes, who can do the sorts of things that witches are traditionally credited with being able to do. In the case of the Macbeth witches in their traditional, 1606 context, we've got these witches who are in the middle of a storm, right? The play opens in a storm, and one of the things witches could do is conjure storms, conjure weather. That was one of the great fears, that they could somehow manipulate meteorology, and they're on a battlefield or in the context of a battlefield. And when you think about the kinds of things witches need for their potions, a battlefield is one of the most terrifying places you can imagine them being. Hacking off bits of those who have died violently to be able to use bits of their corpses in a future spell, a future potion. Though recently and violently dead were great necromancy for telling the future. And so to encounter these three old women on a battlefield in a storm, that's just tapping into some of the most basic fears of what witches are doing, working together outside of the context of mainstream society, unmarried, unattached, on a battlefield where men have contended for power, and yet they're going to root through the dead bodies and get their own power using those corpses at a later date in a potion. So they're operating on the fringe, and yet their fringe activity impacts the traditional power narratives, right? So you've got these women off on the side doing their creepy thing, but their creepy thing off on the side is impacting the king, right? The future king and his wife, and the mainstream political narrative of what's taking place. So I just that from that very first scene, Act 1, Scene 1, you've got women on a battlefield digging through corpses in a storm. I mean, that's like screaming witch. And in some ways, it's almost like Shakespeare's trying to distract you. Over here, here's the creepy women over here. So that what's going on with Macbeth and Lady Macbeth almost comes as slightly more of a surprise. Somehow it's more scary. I love those witches. I just think they're fascinating.
Well, and I loved in Polanski's Macbeth, what you're talking about is very visceral in the film because you see them, and I think the first thing you see is they're burying a severed hand or something in the dirt. And when they concoct their potions for Macbeth to drink, it's like blood in a goblet that they hand him. So you feel a very kind of, tangible form of what their kind of witchcraft is in that film.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it subverts the kind of thing that good women are supposed to do, right? Yeah. Good women make food. They make stew, hearty stew, good stew made out of good ingredients, right? They don't make a potion made out of nasty tidbits, things like I was looking at some of these nasty ingredients, eye of newt, toe of frog, wool of bat, and tongue of dog, and this like a scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw, and gulf. These creepy ingredients. I mean, that's not what you put into a hearty stew that's simmering, smelling good when the family gathers together. I mean, this is a nasty something you make from weird bits out in the middle of the woods, and it's not meant to be consumed in a way that nourishes, but rather in a way that that achieves some ill-omened end. So it's just super creepy, and you're exactly right.
And then, of course, Macbeth is the only play of Shakespeare's that is considered cursed. And, in theater companies, you're not supposed to mention the title in a theater. And some people feel it's because those witches' curses were somehow that Shakespeare had actually gotten them from some real spell book, and that's why every time you perform it, there's this danger lurking.
Yeah, well, there's a specificity to the creation of that potion that makes you wonder, doesn't it? Yes.
When you look to film, are there any witches that really stand out to you that are scary? Which are your kind of favorite witches?
Yeah, that's just such a great question because there's so many witches.
Yes.
Right? Obviously, coming into this conversation with you, I spent a lot of time thinking about who are my favorite witches. And as I thought about it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, it depends on what you're thinking of, what aspect of a witch or a moment of witchcraft that you want to emphasize. But I think, if you're asking me what's the most terrifying witch to me in film, I think I have one favorite, maybe two runners up.
Okay.
So my favorite witch, and it's hard to articulate why, but it's have you ever seen the movie Paranorman?
Yes.
So it's a Leica production, stop motion, and it came out I think 2013. And there's most people think that's a zombie movie, but when you watch it, it's not a zombie movie. It's a textbook witch movie.
I can see ghosts too, and I know that's not all you've been seeing lately, is it? Bad omens. Things you can't quite explain. Strange faces peering through the veil. And I'll bet no one told you about the witch's curse, did they?
Because at the heart of it, and you don't realize it until the very end, at the heart of the crisis in that movie is a young girl named Agatha, Agatha Prendergast, who was accused of being a witch because she heard voices. And the community turns on her and executes her. I have goosebumps just thinking about it. It executes this young girl.
Agatha Prendergast of His Majesty's province of Massachusetts. On this day, you have been arraigned for the horrible crime of witchcraft, witnessed by those whose testimonies have been heard. You have, by this court, been found guilty.
No!
And it is passed on you, according to your grievous crimes, execution. Do you have anything to say for yourself?
I was only playing.
I with fire. You were speaking with the dead.
Wait!
I'll not risk damnation on these good people.
No, you can't do
You are
this!
to be taken
I didn't
to the
do
place
anything
of
wrong.
execution, where you will be hanged by the neck until you be
Stop!
dead.
Leave me alone, or I'll make you sorry! I'll make all of you sorry!
Over time, her spirit gains an angry power that begins to vex this town of Blythe Hollow, and the climax of the movie. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler. Is the young boy Norman comes face to face with Agatha. The young boy Norman, who can also hear voices, comes face to face with Agatha and tries to help her cope with the anger and the vicious accusation that she faced.
Once upon a time, long ago, there was a little girl.
What?
A little girl who was different from the other people in her village. I'm not listening. She could see and do things that no one could understand, and that made them scared of her. I don't like this story. She turned away from everyone and became sad and lonely and had no one to turn to. Stop it! The more she turned away from people, the more scared they were of her. And they did something terrible. They became so scared that they took her away and they killed her. No! But even though she was dead, something in her came back. Stop! And this part of her wouldn't go away, not for 300 years. Shut up! And the longer it stayed, the less there was of the little girl.
And then the community that's around it are the young people of Norman's time, but also those zombie Puritan characters who seem to feel bad about what they did 300 years earlier. But that scene with Agatha, her electrifying anger, literally electrifying anger, that is so terrifying at the end of that scene, makes her, for me, the most horrible witch that I've seen. And I think it's, in some ways it has to do with just the sadness of it being a child accused of witchcraft and put in that particular position. We were talking about child witches a little bit earlier, but I think that's what makes her, for me, the most terrifying, because her power comes from this long simmering anger over the unjust nature of the accusation against her. So for me, she's maybe the most terrifying.
Well, I have to thank you for pointing that out, because I really did not remember the witch in that story.
Right.
And I had to kind of go back and look at it and go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So,
if you look right here on my bag, that's Agatha. I've got a pin with Agatha on my because she's just so unexpected. Maybe it's because it was unexpected.
Yeah.
Because you go to that thinking, oh, this is a zombie movie. How cute.
And
it's
a children's film, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In a way. I took my children to the movie. We watched it all together. And you think, oh, I need to keep my kids' eyes covered for the zombies, because that's what's scary in this movie. But then Agatha was just so surprisingly terrifying, because it's the whole movie is set in a town that is reveling in its witchy past, right?
Mm-hmm.
The kids put on a children's pageant that commemorates the treatment of the witches long ago, and the idea that you've got kids who are celebrating, commemorating this past, not really fully coming to grips with what it meant. And so I think it's just the surprising nature of it, coming in at the end, that makes it so powerful.
And you have some runner-ups here.
Yes, I do. So I don't know why. Maybe it was because I was actually working on my dissertation at the time, but Blair Witch terrified me.
This is Burkittsville, formerly Blair. It is a small, quiet Maryland town, much like a small, quiet town anywhere. No more than 20 families laid their roots here over 200 years ago, many of whom remain, either on this hill or in the town below. There are an unusually high number of children laid to rest here, most of whom passed in the 1940s. Yet no one in the town seems to recall anything unusual about this time. To us, anyway. Yet legend tells a different story. One whose evidence is all around us. Etched in stone.
With that one, it was more just the cavalier curiosity of the three young people going into the woods that made it scary, or watching it, having, doing all this research into the kinds of things that witches did, as I was watching this film the first time, and then just to see them just, walking into this trap of a child killing witch, and just their lack of care and their, like I was saying, their cavalier curiosity that gets them into it, and just the building suspense in that film. And you never even see the witch; you only hear about her. There's hints about what she does, and then to come to that climax of the house in the woods and the way she sucks in young people, that just terrified me.
The scene that I like best in that is when the student filmmakers are interviewing people in the town.
Yes.
And there's this one scene where they talk to this woman who's holding her daughter in her arms.
Yes.
And the mother's just blabbing away like, oh yeah, I think the witch is, and the little kid is crying and trying to cover her mom's mouth as if the things she's saying are too horrific to be spoken, and why doesn't she realize it?
So the creepiest story about her that I ever heard was that two men were out hunting, and they were camped near the cabin or something that she's supposed to haunt. And they disappeared off the face of the earth.
Really?
Okay, it's all right, Ingrid. I'm just telling a scary story, but it's not true.
It's not true.
That, to me, was the scariest scene in that film.
No, I think you're exactly right, because it's almost like children know better.
Yeah,
they just know better. In some ways, because they're the ones that feel the threat of witchcraft, right? So many of our terrifying witches in film, what they're doing is luring children. And so children have that sense of this evil, even going back to Hansel and Gretel. I mean, they have that sense of this evil, this alluring evil. We're going to see in one of our other films. But then there's also that aspect that children can be accused of witchcraft as well, and they're powerless to do anything about it. And Agatha being one of those examples. And then, I thank you for this third witch, who would have been my favorite witch, except for that it was so recent and so new. But Thomasin in The Witch. Although the more I watched that movie, I'm sure we're going to talk about it. I think the mother was a witch all along, but just the witchiness in that film. Whoever it is, whether it's the old woman out in the woods, whether it's Thomasin getting drawn into this other world, or, in my interpretation of it, the mother, who may well have been involved in this Sabbath all along, just that construction of witchcraft in that film. It was that was terrifying. It was textbook. I could see why every student I've had in the last 3 years has asked me, "Have you seen The Witch? Professor Pollard, have you seen The Witch?" And now I know why.
Well, and that film really built this sense of dread through it, and this is set back in, Puritan times, and one of the things
calls itself a Puritan folk
nightmare,
tale, or nightmare, yes.
The director, one of the things it gets to is how isolated these people are, and at night, how pitch black that forest is. You really can't see anything. So it's as if you're looking into space. It's as infinite and as black as looking into a moonless sky. And so the imagination can run wild.
Yes.
Things can exist out there. And I mean, there's a certain quality of the film where you never know exactly what's real and what's not. And on a certain level, you could also read into it that the whole thing is just hysteria and there's no witches.
Right.
Because these people are so isolated, and kind of the tension just gets turned up so high. But it really examines kind of, superstition, fear, hysteria, like so many interesting things, as well as this kind of concept of witches.
But it cuts to the heart of some of the basics of your average witch trial from the late 17th, early 18th century. This idea of the tensions between the Puritan community, within the Puritan community, and male rivaling for power within that community, and how the women in the family could get caught up in that, because you have that proud father who takes his family away from the safety of the enclosed settlement. So you've got those Puritan tensions. You've got the tensions internal to a family, right? The mother-daughter relationship is striking. As this young girl is beginning to get her own power, find her own power in her maturing body, her maturing self. So the struggles between mother and daughter, the struggle of the daughter, Thomasin, with her siblings. And one of my favorite scenes in that movie is the moment by the brook where the irritating twins come out and start to tease Thomasin, and she responds by claiming that witch's power. She claims to be a witch, and you can see the way that something playing out between siblings, just a nasty petty quarrel between siblings, gets taken up a notch when things begin to go wrong within the family. So Thomasin saying, I'm the witch. I'm the one who's doing these things. And she's doing it to gain control over her little sister who doesn't behave well. But that self-claiming of the identity of being the witch comes back to haunt Thomasin in the context of her brother's bewitchment, his own unique situation that takes place out in the woods. So I like how that movie gets at those the larger tensions, right, of the father and the Puritan community and being separated from the safety of the enclosed settlement, but then the family tensions of husband wife, of brother sister, of sisters with one another, of daughter with mother, and those internal family tensions and how they play out and manifest in an accusation.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite witch films.
It's fearsome. I agree. Yeah.
Now, talking about this and kind of the time frame of this, makes me think of all these fairy tales that have witches in them.
Yes.
And fairy tales and fables were, often used as devices to teach kids something. So what kind of is the role of witches in these kind of fairy tale world?
Behave. I mean, in many ways, it's behave, step in line, follow the rules. Many ways the witch serves as a corrective to create proper behavior in women and in children, and in some ways for men as well. But the woman realizes, it's my job to make good food, hearty, wholesome, nourishing, with hearty, wholesome, nourishing ingredients in order to feed my family, nourish my family, care for my family. Otherwise, I could be accused of the noxious potions, the trying to lure other people to me. I should be obedient to my husband, not seem to be this sexual being. So there's that cautionary tale to the wife, and there's the cautionary tale to children, not to wander out in the woods. Right, not to speak to strangers, not to fight with one another, not to wish for power that they do not yet have. So the witch accusation works as a corrective, as a threat in some ways to keep women and children obedient and filling their proper role.
Mm-hmm. And one place where we tend to find some of these fairy tale witches is in the Disney universe.
Yes.
I think a lot of children were traumatized by the witch in... I remember there's a story about the witch in Snow White that Radio City Music Hall had to reupholster a number of seats because children peed their pants in fear at the early screenings of this. And Disney is known for... I think a lot of people who grow up at a certain time will cite Disney films as kind of the starting point of something that terrified them, whether it's Monstro the Whale or some of these witches.
Now shall you deal with me, O Prince, and all the powers of hell!
What's your take on Disney and witches?
Yeah, as the mother of a young daughter, I have to say, one of the things that bothers me with Disney is that there's never a good mother, right? There's just never a kind and caring mother until very recently. I would say Merida, for instance, But even there's the tension between the mother and the daughter. There's not this great mother figure, but usually what there is some terrifying stepmother. Yeah, the mother's dead, right? The father is often out of the picture, and instead, what you have is this terrifying female figure, some kind of witchy character, and you're right. Disney just kills me because there's always the female influence is a witch. As a counter to the princess or whatever she is. For instance, whether it's Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty or, like you were saying, the evil queen who goes from being beautiful to a hag, offset to Snow White. More recent Disney movies, I give them credit. They've come up with slightly more nuanced notions of spell casting and witchery. One of my favorites is in Princess and the Frog, where you've got that juxtaposition between Dr. Facilier, the voodoo man, the voodoo magic man in New Orleans, who's in the urban context and helping people get what they want, as compared to Mama Odie out in the swamp of the bayou of beyond the bounds of New Orleans. So you have a juxtaposition of a male evil as up against a female good working of magic of some sort.
Mama Odie, we don't want to take up too much of your time.
Y'all want some candy?
Not really.
No, thank you.
Well, now that's too bad. It's a special candy. Would have turned y'all human.
Well, we just don't eat it.
I'm just messing with y'all.
But, somebody like Ursula, the sea witch in The Little Mermaid, a great spell, something like Aruba Sabruba, come winds of the Caspian Sea.
Aruga Savruga, come winds of the Caspian Sea. Now Rhinsus, Glossitis, Equinax, Laryngitis, La Voce to me. Now sing.
She's sort of drawing on these powers from all over the place, which just makes her this great witch who's reaching out to the farthest regions to manifest her power. So there's some great Disney witches, and I think most people's favorite is Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. I think what makes her so fascinating is that her evil is all out of it's out of whack with the wrong done to her, right? She shows up on the scene of the presentation of Aurora, and she seems to be angry because she's not invited to this event.
I really felt quite distressed at not receiving an invitation.
You weren't wanted.
Not what? Oh dear, what an awkward situation. I had hoped it was merely due to some oversight. Well, in that event, I'd best be on my way.
And you're not offended, Your Excellency?
Why, no, Your Majesty. And to show I bear no ill will, I, too, shall bestow a gift on the child. Listen well, all of you. The princess shall indeed grow in grace and beauty, beloved by all who know her. But before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she shall prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die.
Oh, no.
And yet the anger and the wickedness she brings with her seems all out of proportion to being dissed on an invite to celebrate the birth of this child. So I think Maleficent, whose name means evildoer, witch woman, so just the disproportionate nature of her witchiness to the apparent slight she's responding to, I think makes her terrifying. And of course, the fact that she becomes this shape-shifting wicked dragon at the end of the film. Yeah, spoiler if in case nobody's seen that. But no, the disproportionate nature of her evil and the power of her shape-shifting is so striking in that film. I think it still terrifies. Yeah.
What we've been talking about so far are Disney's animated witches, which had a major impact on a lot of children. But Disney has also ventured into the live action realm.
Yes.
And what do you think of what they've done with live action?
Well, I think what they've done with live action, especially with Maleficent, the one in which Angelina Jolie plays a far more fully fleshed out, like literally fleshed out Maleficent. What's striking is it's keeping with our contemporary notion of wanting to understand the motivations of this witch. That the witch can't. Whereas in 1959 with the animated Maleficent, her evil comes from out of nowhere. Yeah, you don't understand why she's so witchy. Whereas this more contemporary enfleshed Maleficent, played by Angelina Jolie, the idea is to try to understand where is she coming from, that there must be something misunderstood here, that there's got to be a reason why she would show up and be so angry. And I think this live action, more recent version of Maleficent is in keeping with this modern desire to understand this witchy woman. Where's she coming from? Surely there's a motive. There's a backstory, and we want to know it.
What have you done to my beautiful self?
Would you rather I let them beat you to death?
I'm not certain.
Stop complaining. I saved your life.
Forgive me.
What do I call you?
Theoval. And in return for saving my life, I am your servant. Whatever you need.
Wings. I need you to be my wings.
It's not unlike the backstory in Wicked, where we're trying to understand where's Elphaba coming from, the Green Wicked Witch of the West. Why? How did she get that way? Surely there's a backstory that makes this more complex and doesn't make this woman's evil inexplicable, but rather there's a reason for it. There's a core that we can get to the heart of. So I think that's part of what's going on with these modern exculpating versions of witches.
Well, you mentioned Wicked, which then, of course, references back to Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
And there we have another witch, the Wicked Witch of the West, who and a good witch also, Glinda.
Yeah, Glinda.
But
I dressed as Glinda for Halloween many times as a child. Who knew, right?
But that's another instance of a film kind of aimed at children that terrified a lot of children. Between the witch and the flying monkeys, I think there were a lot of traumatized children.
Yes.
Take your army to the haunted forest and bring me that girl and her dog. Do what you like with the others, but I want her alive and unharmed. They'll give you no trouble, I promise you that. I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them. Take special care of those ruby slippers. I want those most of all. Now fly! Fly!
When I was a kid, my best friend was terrified of the Wicked Witch of the West and the monkeys, and I was flabbergasted. I had no idea why she was so terrified. I thought the witch was awesome. I thought she was fabulous, and I loved the way I loved the witch. I guess she's the Wicked Witch of the East who gets the house that lands on her at the very beginning of the film that produced this produces the ruby slippers. I loved all of these witches. I wanted to meet the Witch of the South. Where's she? So no, I found the witches fascinating even as a child. They're just great.
See, the groundwork was set from an early age.
It was truly set, yes.
Now, you talked about how your interest started in these Roman witches, and there was actually a television series that focused on this time frame as well. I have not seen this. I did not even realize there were witches in there because I think I probably would have been much more attracted to the series. So tell me a little bit about this show, Rome, and how it dealt with witches.
Just over 10 years ago, there was a miniseries, Rome, on HBO. It was a great miniseries. I was so disappointed when they took it off air. The miniseries, Rome, is based in that moment of political turmoil at the end of the Roman Republic, so the late 1st century BCE. and the family interactions that are playing out and the political strife that's taking place. And at the heart of the narrative is the relationship of the women to the powerful men. And one of the women, Servilia, there's a moment in the miniseries where she casts what is just a perfect representation of a Roman curse tablet, where she, has the sheet of metal, she's got her stylus, and she's, tracing out the curse and doing it with such ferocity and anger. You can tell that there's almost a catharsis that's going on for her as she is casting this spell.
By the spirits of my ancestors, I curse Gaius Julius Caesar. Let his penis wither, let his bones crack. Let him see his legions drown in their own blood. Gods of the Inferno, I offer to you his limbs, his head, his mouth, his breath, his speech, his hands, his liver, his heart, his stomach. Gods of the Inferno, let me see him suffer deeply, and I will rejoice and sacrifice to you.
She's summoning the powers of the underworld, not the traditional Roman pantheon gods and goddesses of good, but she's digging deep, literally, to those chthonic deities, and she's wishing evil on Julius Caesar. She's even calling on his family gods to help affect this curse. She wants him to have a lack of success in his military and political ends, which is going to have just dramatic impact, right? So you see where this woman's anger and just ferocious hatred towards this male politician could, if it played out properly, have some dramatic political impact. So you see what's going on in the personal, potentially having an impact in the political. But Servilia traces out this curse, and she's angry, and she's like stabbing at the metal of her curse tablet. And you could see that even just the process of creating the curse is an almost catharsis for her to get her anger out. And then she goes to deposit the curse tablet, and she does exactly what you're supposed to do. She folds up this bit of metal, she stabs through it with she pierces it with a nail, and then she goes to deposit it at the house of Julius Caesar. And one of the things that would make one of these curses effective is if a corpse demon were summoned to effect its end. A corpse demon is someone who's violently dead, who is able to achieve the ends of the curse tablet. And Servilia needs a curse tablet. So what does she do? She goes to the house of Julius Caesar, and one of the striking things about it as well is for magic to work in antiquity, it had to be private and public at the same time. Everyone had to know you were cursed in order for the curse to actually happen. So Servilia goes to the house of Julius Caesar, where her female rival Attia is located, and she calls her out. She's moaning and groaning outside of the house, and the people within the house come out to see what's going on, and the crowd is gathered, watching this cursing. And Servilia, if she were doing a good curse tablet, she probably would have gone in the middle of the night and shoved it into a corner. But she wants to have this public event, and so to create a corpse demon, she kills herself, right there, making herself into a restless dead character who will affect the ends of this curse. And the beauty of this one scene is she kills herself. Her handmaiden is right there, dies as well. I think she kills herself as well. They fall onto the ground, blood sort of streaming out, and the camera pulls back and up. And what you see is there, like the pupil of an eye. The crowd is gathered around, and it sort of looks like this symbol that that is so important for understanding magic in the Roman world, namely the evil eye. So there's this cinematic representation of the evil eye, which is at the heart of the magic. That the envy that's there in the midst of the evil eye is part of the way the magic is working. So it was just beautiful. I don't know if the person who created the miniseries meant for it to be that way. Surely they did, but it's just this great example of how a curse tablet was supposed to have worked. It's got that public component, the private component, and it's just creepy. And it can have, it's trying to deal with a personal enmity, but in a way that's going to have very public and political ramifications and repercussions if it plays out properly. So it's just a great scene. You should watch it, if only for that scene with Servilia.
I am definitely going to seek that out.
Yes.
Are there other films you feel capture that spell casting sensation well?
Yeah. So back to Disney. I know you're not a fan of Disney, but I think probably my favorite scene of the casting of a spell occurs in a Disney film, namely, and an unexpected one at that, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. There's a scene in it where Minister Frollo, the individual who has Quasimodo up in his tower, up in the cathedral, he has fallen under the spell of Esmeralda. He's bewitched by her beauty, and he's trying to deal with this fact that he's so in love with her. And so there's a scene where he is. It begins with him in confession.
Beata Maria, you know I am a righteous man. Of my virtue I am justly proud.
And similar to the Monty Python scene, right, which begins with the chanting, Dona eis requiem. This one begins with monks chanting, instead singing Beata Maria, Blessed Mary. So it's beginning in this very chaste way, and this asking for sin to be forgiven. So you hear these monks in the background doing their chants, but then you've got Minister Frollo, who's Beata Maria, although I am a righteous man. And so he's dealing with his guilt in the midst of his righteousness, and he goes from guilt to destroy Esmeralda within the space of about 2 minutes. And he's blaming the woman. He pulls out of his cloak her scarf.
It's not my fault. I'm not to blame. It is the gypsy girl, the witch who set this flame. It's not my fault. If in God's plan, he made the devil so much stronger than a man. Protect me, Maria. Don't let the siren cast her spell. Don't let her fire sear my flesh and bone. Destroy Esmeralda and let her taste the fires of hell, or else let her be mine and mine alone.
To make a spell work, you have to have ousia, stuff from the person you're wanting to curse. So he's got her scarf. He throws it into the fire. He wants her to burn. He wants her to be tortured. So it goes from him taking his angst over loving someone he ought not to love, and it morphs from confession into outright brutal spellcasting, where he wants her, Esmeralda, to feel every bit the pain that he feels for loving her, and it just turns into a wicked curse. I highly recommend that one scene for the way it juxtaposes proper religiosity and Frollo's just guilt, venturing then into vicious spell casting, and it's just a great scene.
And you don't see a whole lot of men casting spells in films.
No, you don't, and that's what makes that particular scene so powerful, because he goes from being the warden of the cathedral, right, to being just a mean, evil spellcaster, all in the, like I said, in the course of 2 minutes, and so it's shocking in that shift, and drives home the power of the spell he's casting. It's just a great scene.
So you have a couple of other live-action ones,
yes,
that involve women, and these have a little humor to them as well.
Yeah, correct. Have you seen these films? I think, it's hard. I think maybe my favorite witch movie is Practical Magic. Again, I don't know why. Maybe it's because I saw it in proximity to Blair Witch, which terrified me. It's something about the kinder, gentler, sisters, sister power just spoke to my soul. But the Owen sisters in Practical Magic are just, again, I think they are a part of this more contemporary, exculpate the witches. I was talking about the issue of Maleficent, making her understandable. I mean, the Owen sisters, Gillian and Sally, where they work together, and a part of their power comes from their sisterly bond, and it's generations of sisters going back that spoke to me. And there are a couple of moments where they work spells, but my favorite is when they're attempting to bring Jimmy Angela back to life. They don't. I think Nicole Kidman's character is like, Jimmy's already dark and natural, dark and unnatural. We can bring him back. It doesn't matter if he's creepy. But this idea that they're trying to bring this wicked guy back from the dead.
So, are you sure you want to do this?
Absolutely.
Lips pursed, emit wind over tongue in motion, teeth on edge, touch bound in smudge of blue sage with braided wheat straw, insert needles through eyes of corpse. Through the eye? In the eye.
And they improvise. They've got their spell book that they pull out. They lay it out on the counter. They're digging through it, trying to find this spell for vivifying a corpse, and just their practical approach to it. They need something white, whipped cream. Make a star out of whipped cream on Jimmy's chest.
I need for you to get me something white to write on top of the star. Chop, chop. That's actually brilliant. No, this is good. This is good. Oh. Now we're supposed to say, black is night, erase death from our sight.
And then the way that they're just kind of grossed out by what they need to do, the sticking of the needle in the eyes. You're like, no, can't do that. So it's a great scene that in some ways puts humor into this sort of terrifying moment where they're trying to bring a horrible individual back to life, so that they're not going to have to take responsibility for his death in the first place. But you see the practical components of trying to effect a spell, where you're looking and you're like, oh, I need this. Going back to this Macbeth, which is, I need Eye of Newt. I don't have Eye of Newt. And you want to Google it. What is a substitute for Eye of Newt in this spell? Like you do when you need baking soda and you don't have it to make whatever thing you're cooking up. And you Google it to figure out what will substitute for baking soda. And so you see that sort of pragmatic resourcefulness in spell casting with these sisters. And there's so many spells in that movie, but the one where they're vivifying the dead Jimmy Angela is probably my favorite from it. And then very similar to that, Witches of Eastwick, of course, a great film based on a great book, but the efforts by Alexandra, Jane, and Sookie to first they conjure up the man they want, but then at the end of the film, when they're trying to get rid of him, and they create a puppet that represents the Jack Nicholson, right? Yeah, the Jack Nicholson character, where they're just stabbing him and spitting pits at him, and then you see him in a church throwing up and moving around like this puppet is being mistreated.
It doesn't look like him. It doesn't have to look exactly like him, sweetheart. We know who it is.
You should have saved a little hair for his head. He looks a little funny with no hair.
This isn't going to hurt him. We're not trying to hurt him, Jane. We're just trying to send him away.
Jane, come on.
And so it's just a great scene where you see how these things play out. So this is probably my favorite spellcasting scenes.
And Witches of Eastwick taps into kind of using the witches as more, instead of showing women simply as being accused of witchcraft or victimized, it's kind of these women who are using the witchcraft and then kind of empowering themselves and putting a man in his place, so to speak.
Exactly. Even if it's the devil himself, yes. Right? Yeah, no, but exactly, Satan. But this ability to have these very different women as well, different women working together to achieve a particular end, and not in competition with one another, but in a genuinely cooperative way. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many of these witch scenes speak to women, that instead of getting to some sort of petty discord between women, it allows women to see the possibilities of working together to achieve something, whether it's the Owen sisters or Alexandra, Jane, and Sookie. So it's kind of neat that it plays on that.
So in Witches of Eastwick, this was kind of an empowering use of witchcraft for women. What are some other positive images of witches or of this kind of magical world?
Well, I think we were talking earlier about the film Practical Magic. And one of the reasons I'm fond of that movie and that depiction of witches is it gets at that whole sister power idea, women working together with women, not in a way where they're vying for power with one another, but where they're trying to achieve some sort of end. And one of the striking things in the climax of that movie is the two sisters are working together to cast out this demon, Jimmy Angelov. But they use the PTA phone tree to call on just all of these women within the community who had shunned them and their family over generations. So the same girls who had mocked these sisters in their youth are showing up, excited to find out what's going on in this witchy house and to help and come together as women to cast out this evil force. And then women sitting around saying things like, oh, my daughter, she cried out. She was sick across town, and I heard it. I felt it. And one of the older aunts of the two main sister characters in Practical Magic saying, oh, there's a little witch in all of us, dear. Yeah, and just that sort of empowering sense of women working together, not in competition with one another, but bonding together to face the evils of the world.
All right, ladies, pick a broom, form a circle.
Shit. Whoa. I've been strung out by a guy before, but this is...
Sally.
Would each of you now pick up your brooms, hold them at staff length, handle to brush. Remember that as we go forth, it is only with our hearts beating as one that we can save the life of this child.
Dite perdant, te maledico. Dite perdant, te maledico. Dite perdant.
Are we supposed to say this?
Dite perdant,
Te maledico.
Dite perdant,
So there's a power in that, I think, in Practical Magic. So it's not the creepy dark side of witchcraft that we see in a lot of movies, but it's empowering sister bonding, and sisters, not just biological sisters, but women as a sisterhood working against the world. So I like that a lot.
And recently we've had, not specifically called witch, but Hermione in the Harry Potter films is a wizard. So does that count as a witch on a certain level?
I think so. The Harry Potter films are just fabulous for creating this amazing world of magic. J.K. Rowling has done just a tremendous job of imagining a full magical world. Yeah, everything that the scholars who study the kind of stuff that I look at in antiquity, everything we might want the answers to, but our sources have limits, she has thought out to its extreme, whether the full sense of how do you train witches and wizards from age 10 to age 18. Yeah, what does the world within which they operate look like? How do magic users and non-magic users interact with one another? That world of the witches and wizards versus the muggles, so the magic versus muggles. And in some ways, that world is even more fully fleshed out in the Fantastic Beasts series that is being filmed now. The Newt Scamander and Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, and how witchcraft is imagined, and the broader witch and magic world of J.K. Rowling's imagination. But exactly the way that competition is at the heart of that magical world, whether it's Harry versus Voldemort or the competition within the school, that what scholars who do what I do call the agonistic, competitive context of magic, where it's always taking place in the context of an issue where the outcome is in doubt, and whoever can manipulate their surroundings in a way that's most effective can win that competition. So the magical world of Harry Potter is just fabulous for imagining out all of the issues that scholars wish they knew the details of from, say, ancient Rome, but J.K. Rowling has imagined to its logical conclusion. Especially the schooling, especially the interactions of magic users and non-magic users, and especially the idea of the transmission of magical knowledge across generations and how people choose to use it. And then, of course, speaking of women, who can't love Hermione, the know-it-all, the most talented witch of her age, right? And from the time she's young and is scolding Ron on the proper pronunciation of Wingardium Leviosa.
Look, stop. You're going to take someone's eye out. Besides, you're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
You do it then if you're so clever.
Go on.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Oh, well done. See here, everyone. Miss Granger's done it.
And the way she says it as compared to the way Ron and everyone else says it sounds almost identical, and yet she somehow has done it better with the flip of her wand or the flick and swish of her wand and her enunciation of those terms, Wingardium Leviosa. So she's just fabulous as a witch in that fabulously imagined world.
And also by putting it in a school setting, it's this educational process, right. And then you get like the rules and the how-to and all those other things that kind of give it a different sensation than just this kind of scary thing that sometimes is on the periphery of a horror film where it seems to be bound by no rules and no form or anything.
Exactly. And the rules are so clear, and the fields of magic are so clear as well. Even the types of magic classes that Harry and his peers take, everything from potions to transformations to future telling, each of the classes that they go to are categories of magic that you'll see in accusations of witchcraft in the early modern period, and then going back to books where those kinds of magic are described in the Roman period. So even the kinds of magic that populate that world are a filling out of this, an imaginative filling out of what we see in the historical records.
And are there other films that kind of give you this sense of witches in practice, like what they do on a daily basis, or what kind of things,
the daily activities of witches?
Yeah, exactly. Like the real life of witches. Are there, films where, or are there films where we get to see aspects of a witch's life. I think you had mentioned something about Sabbath, witch's Sabbath.
Yeah, well, that idea of witches working together outside of the community, wandering out into the periphery, the forests on the edge of town. We were talking at one point about the movie The Witch, the recent movie, and are we allowed to talk about spoilers?
Yes.
Okay, we can do spoilers. So the end of that movie, when Thomasin wanders out and leaves the brutal, horrific scene that is the climax of that film, and finds these women not clothed, cavorting with pitchforks, and there's goats, and they're rising up into the sky, flying in a circle. I mean, this is sort of textbook imagination of what witches might do, and you see it in woodcut prints from the 16th century, like Durer's Witch's Sabbath. But that same sort of fear of what women are doing out on the periphery of community, it goes all the way back to the Roman period and the Greek period before that, with concerns about maenads out in the woods, tearing animals and babies limb from limb. So that's not exactly an everyday thing that we've got with our witches, but it's certainly one of the things that they're imagined as doing. That's a really good question. The everyday. Do you have anything in mind? I'm wondering.
Not so much in that historical context,
Right.
but Rosemary's Baby is a film where you kind of have witchcraft brought to this very kind of mundane level with Ruth Gordon as the most. You would never suspect Ruth Gordon of being a witch, and she's kind of this annoying neighbor who keeps kind of butting into Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes' newlywed life, and you just think, oh, she just doesn't have any children. She has a husband, but she just doesn't have enough on her hands to keep her busy.
I got a 2-inch thick sirloin steak sitting defrosting right this minute. Why don't you and Guy come over and have supper with us tonight? What do you say?
Oh, no, we couldn't.
Why not?
No, really, that's very kind of you.
Listen, it'd be a real help to us. First night we'll be alone since.
Are you sure it wouldn't be too much trouble for you?
Oh, honey, if there's trouble, I wouldn't ask you.
All right, you go ahead and count on us. I'll have to check with Guy, though.
Listen, you tell him I won't take no for an answer. Oh, here's your mail. Now, Ed.
Thank you.
But then slowly it's revealed what she is, and you get this sense of this kind of mundane, day-to-day existence of a modern witch.
Right, exactly. No, it's funny you should mention Rosemary's Baby, because I always think of that as more a film about the satanic panic of the 60s and 70s, and being in that historic moment of the Church of Satan in the 1960s, and that film projecting a fear of Satanists in our midst. So we were talking about how you don't necessarily remember the witch from the zombie movie Paranorman.
Right.
When I think Rosemary's Baby, I think the satanic aspect of it, and not this annoying neighbor. But you're exactly right. Here she embodies the old lady who's past childbearing age, who just wants to get involved in someone else's life, someone else's formative moment of giving birth, and then we find out there's a much darker underbelly to all of that. But that use of herbs and the creation of an herbal packet that stinks that Rosemary's asked to wear around her neck, the tennis root, and somehow being powerful and protecting what Rosemary is carrying. So yeah, that idea of the annoying old lady next door with her potions and her insertion of herself into this life-giving moment. It gets right there with the traditional idea of what witches do. Another scene, if we're going along that line, we were talking about, I can't remember if we talked about this yet or not, but the movie Hocus Pocus, and the Sanderson sisters. And my favorite one of those is Sarah, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, and she's the buxom, blonde, beautiful one of these three sisters, and her innocuous charm. Do you know this little hit song that she sings?
No, I don't.
It's I think it's "Come Little Children, I'll Take Thee Away."
Use thy voice, Sarah. Fill the sky. Bring the little brats to die.
Come, little children, I'll take thee away into a land of enchantment. Come, little children, the time's come to play here in my garden of magic.
And she sings this beautiful song, and it pulls the children out of their houses and is dragging them out to her house in the middle of the woods, for these children to be used for these ill ends that these sisters have in mind to steal their youth. But it gets to that idea. We were talking about it with Blair Witch. I remember when you were struck by the idea of the little girl putting her hand over the mother's mouth as the mother is describing the kinds of stuff that witches can do. In that case, what the Blair Witch does, and yet children having this fear, this innate fear of witches, maybe because stories are used to scare children, but also because, in this particular instance, it's the kind of thing that witches are imagined to do, luring children out of the safety of their homes and out of their parents' embrace and protection, and then using those children for, just horrible purposes. The Witch, we were talking about that movie where the young baby, I think Samuel, is taken from Thomasin while she's caring for him, and then just put to just horrible use, brutalized and used to anoint the body of the old witch at the start of that film. So just that fear of what witches do with children, imagined in this grotesque, terrible way in the movie The Witch, but in this humorous, almost sexy way with the Sarah Jessica Parker character, with her haunting chant, her haunting song that she sings to lure children. Which gets to another issue, and I'm kind of just riffing here, but the idea of spell casting and what a spell is, and not to go all etymological on you, but I'm a trained classicist, so sometimes we do that. The term for spell is Carmen, and Carmen is a word which means song, and that overlap between song, poem, and spell is wonderfully ambiguous, and leads to some of the concerns of what women are doing when they're singing these alluring songs or writing poetry, as in the case of Veronica Franco, who's another witch we might talk about, or accused witch that we might talk about.
So from a historical perspective, were witches always kind of seen in a negative light in the past? And is it only something kind of recent where witchcraft or sorcery or, the notion of Wiccans has been turned around to say like, oh, wait, women have been, misidentified as these witches? Or, it seems like there's been a historical change in kind of how witches are defined or viewed.
Well, you're asking the wrong person. Somebody who studies Roman history who could take it back 2,500 years if we want to talk about historical perspective. But you're right that there is something of a change, and at the risk of dramatic reductionism in the way I'm describing it, it depends on when you're talking about and which sources you look at. So, for instance, just in broad generalities in the Roman period, you might have the same activity that might get done, raising someone from the dead, whereas if a woman does it, she might be cast as a witch in a source. So we have first century sources that describe women out on the battlefields, conjuring up the corpses of dead soldiers to tell the future or to achieve some other outcome. But then you also have, from almost the exact same time period, descriptions of male wonder workers who raise individuals from the dead, and the sources reporting that describe this as miracles. For instance, Jesus with Lazarus. So we have these competing perspectives from the exact same time period where the same thing is being done, a raising of someone from the dead, but a woman doing it in a battlefield context to tell the future comes off as a witch story. A powerful man doing it to challenge this boundary between life and death and make claims to divine power, divine entity himself, becomes wonder-working. And you see even the negotiation of that taking place with the character of Simon Magus from the canonical story of Acts, where he wants the power that the Christian wonder workers have, and they critique him for wanting it for the wrong reasons or wanting to charge for its use, charge money for it to be done, to have that skill. So taking it back to the Roman period, just broad generalities, we see the same activity. A woman described as doing it, she's a witch. A man doing it, he's a wonder worker. But we see examples of that moving through 2,000 years of history. And even with women, sometimes it's the issue of what is that woman manipulating the natural world? What is her goal in doing that? Is she doing it because she wants to heal someone from a sickness? Well, that's good. That's a good end, and she might be described as a white witch. Or is she doing it? Is she concocting some sort of poison to kill someone, maybe to help cause intrigue within a court system of political power, in which case she becomes a witch, and an evil witch at that. So in many cases, it's situational throughout the historical context, whether an individual, male or female, gets seen as being a witch or a wonder worker.
Now, there are very real consequences for some of these women who are accused of witchcraft in history. So talk a little bit about witch trials on film, and do any of them kind of capture what was really going on in history and what kind of realities that were for people?
Right. I mean, there's 3 witch trials that come to mind on film when you're trying to imagine the historicity of what takes place in a trial. The first is, of course, Monty Python's Holy Grail, which we've talked about, but gets at that issue of an attempt to apply reason and rationality to a circumstance which is not reasonable and not rational, and the struggles that play out as a result. So that one's utterly fictive and made up, but cuts to the heart of some of the same issues. But probably my 2 favorite trials on film of witches is the trial of Veronica Franco at the end of the movie Dangerous Beauty. We have this woman, Veronica Franco, who is a courtesan in 16th century Venice.
In a place where wealth and power belonged to men.
Glorious architecture, indeed.
in a time when women existed only as possessions.
How do people marry, Mother? They strike a bargain. What's to bargain over if you're in love?
One woman's only chance to fulfill her love.
You know we can't marry.
Then why are you here?
I must marry according to my station.
Would come from selling her passion.
You can still have Marco. You'll become a courtesan, like your mother used to be. Minister Ramberti, I'd like to present you to my daughter, Veronica.
A national asset.
Perhaps we should make you ambassador to the Emperor.
Bravo, bravo!
Why, Marco Venier, I do believe you're jealous.
There's not a woman in Venice I can't have.
And there's not a man in Venice that I can't have.
One woman
I confess I embraced freedom over a wife's obedience.
would bare her soul.
I confess I pray still to feel the touch of my lover's lips.
And inspire a passionless era.
What is this if not witchcraft? Then for what did they pay you?
For the dream of love, as it cannot exist in this world that you've created.
And at the start of the film, we see the power that's inherent in her sexuality and her ability to use not just sexuality, but also her mind, her smarts to entice men, to cast a spell over them. And when this is going well for the city of Venice, when men are bolstered by her affections, there's a moment where the film describes her or depicts her as alluring the French king into supporting the Venetian navy to go fight the Ottoman Turks. Her wiles and her verse writing, she's a poetess, is seen as positive. But when the fortunes of Venice turn and plague comes to the city and the military is suffering defeat, all of a sudden this courtesan who has been lifted up as this great representative of Venice becomes the scapegoat, the target of accusation, in particular the Inquisition coming to the city of Venice to root out this evil. And the trial is pretty fascinating of Veronica Franco in this particular film because she calls it out for what it is, namely, here she is as a woman trying to exert power in a man's world, and when that goes well for the men, that's all fine and dandy. But when things start to go badly for the men, they point to her as the heart of all of their troubles. And there's just a great moment where she says, what other option did I have? I am not a man. I do not have money. If I wanted to have a life, this was my choice. And so I particularly love that witch trial. Because you see the competing courts, the ecclesiastical court and the Venetian court, vying for who has the right to try this particular case. You see the very public nature of the accusation and how an accusation of witchcraft may not have anything to do about witchcraft whatsoever, but it's often about other issues. In this particular case, looking to find someone to blame for the fact that Venice is suffering plague and defeat at that particular moment. And when you're sort of looking around, oh, sexy woman who exerts so much power and is a verse writer. Remember we were talking about songs and poems and verse as being essentially spell. And so she had been casting her spell in these wholesome verses, but then it makes it very easy to look at her and call her the witch when things go badly. And then, of course, I don't even know if this one counts as a movie, but The Crucible, which is a movie drawing on a play, but the scenes of the trials and how those play out, and the looking to blame again the most likely scapegoat, the old women in the town who are midwives, make an easy target, and seeing the way these young girls at Salem have so much power, and in fact they're claiming a power through the accusing of others of witchcraft. So witchcraft accusations are fascinating because sometimes it's not at all about what anyone is actually doing, but they allow you to see what the fears are of what a witch in the imagination could do, and how those fears are manipulated or capitalized on by those who do the accusation. And so witch trials are, in film and in reality, are this fascinating opportunity to get your finger on the pulse of what's going on in a community. What are the tensions? What are the fears? What are the power relationships that are getting negotiated by these accusations?
Well, and that's exactly what the playwright Arthur Miller was tapping into, because this was around the time of the McCarthy hearings.
Exactly.
So talk a little bit about how this term, witch trial and witch hunt, has become a part of our language and represents something very specific now.
Right. I mean, whenever I hear the term witch hunt, this is a witch hunt, I think the idea is that you're pointing to that accusation as being invalid, that it's not legitimate in some way. Whereas, as we see with these films and with historical perspective, one steps back and realizes, wait a second, witch hunts are this much larger nexus of social issues that are playing out, and the idea of a witch hunt as being an illegitimate accusation, there's some truth to that as a way of thinking of it. But as a historian, I want to step back and say, okay, wait a second, who's accusing whom of what? What is the broader context? And what can that tell us about what is facing the community that's using this term witch hunt? And you're exactly right, referring to the communism, the McCarthy era context for the Crucible, that idea of the witch hunt was serving as an allegory for unjust accusation, or accusation that was the point of it was to talk about that broader issue of communism. Not necessarily to get to the heart of what any individual had actually done. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it's witch hunt is this term that gets used to talk about something else, to talk about broader issues of accusation, legitimate or illegitimate. But as a historian who studies it, I always want to get to the heart of who's accusing who of what and why and how it plays out in the long run.
Well, it's interesting that it caught on so firmly in our and is so rooted in our language now that people, and especially now, people bandy it about all the time whenever anybody gets accused and feels that they're not being accused with any justification. It's like, it's a witch hunt. And I just find it interesting that these things that are real from history and that point to a very scary time for these women who were being accused now is, come to represent this, particular
Well, it never fails whenever, someone in contemporary political life might shout out the word witch hunt. I'm a member of a community of Twitter historians, right? So historians on Twitter, and it never fails that you get the endless posting of, now this is a real witch hunt, and posting of 1692 or what was taking place in early modern Europe, or even going back to the first century in ancient Rome, where there are these very real moments where we have women being accused of, and men being accused of manipulating power and facing real consequences, as you were saying, as a result.
Well, I really want to thank you for coming on and talking about witches. We might have to convene again.
I hope so. This has been a lot of fun.
For some more. Yeah. So if people are interested in witches, you teach a class here at San Diego State, but San Diego State also has some resources that people can make use of.
Absolutely. You and I met at that event, the Walpurgisnacht event, which was a celebration at the library here at San Diego State, especially Special Collections and University Archives, which had acquired a copy of the Malleus Maleficarum. The Malleus Maleficarum is this text that dates to the late 15th century. And Malleus Maleficarum is called the Hammer of Witches. It's a text that was created by 2 monks, and it's essentially a witch hunting manual. And so Special Collections and University Archives here at San Diego State recently acquired an early print copy of this text. It's so early. It's classified as something called an incunabulum, which is Latin for cradle, which is referring to the idea of print culture being in its infancy when this text was printed. So it's a very early printed edition of the Malleus Maleficarum that Special Collections and University Archives has acquired. And to celebrate that in a somewhat subversive way, we hosted this Witches' Night event on Walpurgisnacht, which is a night, the night before May Day, which I say the word witch a lot, but in multiple contexts. But it's a night that has dual meaning. It was a night when Christians would burn bonfires to ward off the evils of witches. But it was also a night thought to be a moment where witches would gather together and celebrate their Sabbath. And so we thought it would be a lot of fun to celebrate the acquisition of this very important text by the library by holding this public event where I met you. And I want to give a shout out to a trio of women, sort of like our Macbeth witches. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me calling them that. Amanda Lanthorne, Anna Culbertson, and Pam Jackson, who in Special Collections and University Archives have been pulling together this wonderful study collection that's valuable for making sense of witchcraft in historical context. They've been accumulating everything from herbal treatises to collections of witchcraft in comics. And it's a real hidden gem here at San Diego State. So I hope if people have the opportunity and interest, they might reach out to Special Collections and University Archives at our library and see the amazing collections that are being accumulated there for the public, for people to come and study.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was San Diego State professor Elizabeth Pollard. I'll have a list of the witch films we discussed at kpbs.org/cinemajunkie if you want to check it out. I hope this puts you in the right mood for Halloween and for watching some of these movies. Thanks for listening to another episode of KPBS Cinema Junkie Podcast. If you enjoy the show, please recommend it to a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. I try to get the show out every other Friday, except during holidays like Halloween. Next month, I'll be talking to a stunt driver about the best car chases and car movies from Bullitt to Mad Max. Till our next film fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.